Hi again then guys, and today is a very special review for Forza Motorsport 7. We haven't discussed any cars from this game in a few weeks, so what better way to return than with not only a new DLC pack, but with one of the cars which I have for literally years been hoping would come back to either Forza or Gran Turismo because of how iconic it is, but in a kind of understated way. It's a cult classic within its subcategory of being a homologated GT1 car for the road. It's not one of the most successful, in a similar way to the TVR Speed 12. It was kind of patchy, but at the same time, for a road car, it has a ton of potential. And as far as the Lotus brand goes, it's pretty much the most exotic car they've ever built. Definitely the most exotic road car they've ever built. And the car in question is, of course, the mighty Lotus Elise GT1. I love this car. I've got a model car of it sitting on my shelf in its racing form, black and yellow. We've discussed this car on Gran Turismo 2. We've discussed it in Project Gotham 3. I love discussing this car whenever possible. It's not one of my absolute favourites if I were to list my favourite cars, but it is a car which I have a lot of love for, because I've always loved the road-going versions of GT1 cars, and this one just has that super obscure factor turned right up to 11, whereas stuff like the 911 GT1, the CLK GTR, they're just far better known cars. Now this one doesn't have as much power as something like the Merc or the Porsche or a Panoz, but it is a Lotus. And Lotus has had a very long-standing tradition of getting performance out of their cars around a track, which goes way beyond what their engine size or raw power would suggest they should or would be capable of. And that's the case here, because the road-going version of the Elise only has 350 horsepower. That doesn't sound very impressive. That's pretty much the second lowest to the Nissan R390, which is basically the next closest thing with 550 horsepower, and then most of the others have even more, 600 or more in most cases. So why is this one so low? Well, basically because the road-going form has a 3.5 litre, I believe a 6-cylinder engine, if memory serves, as opposed to the 5.7 litre V8 of the race car. It's kind of a shame that the road version didn't have that as well, but still, as soon as you drive this car, you immediately see and feel just how good it is, because I expected this car to be perhaps a little bit twitchy, or more likely a little bit slippery, because Lotus doesn't have a huge amount of experience with GT1 cars. They have two, as far as I'm aware, the Elise GT1 and the even rarer Esprit GT1, which I don't believe they ever made a road version of. So the thing that holds those cars in common, in particular the Elise, is that the other two games that I've driven it on, Gran Turismo 2 and Project Gotham 3, it's a slightly challenging car on both of those games. It's twitchy on Project Gotham, it's slippery on Gran Turismo, so what would it be like on a next-gen game? Because this is the only next-gen game on Xbox or PlayStation to feature this car, so it's a totally new playing field. Well, I'm very happy to say that by the time I exited the first corner, there was a grin on my face, because this car is superb. It literally is. One of the best cars, I would say, of any DLC pack in any Forza game so far, and that's irrelevant of how much I love the car. It's that good. Now, for straight line power, there are plenty of cars which can outrun it. The top speed is only about 170, but the 0 to 60 time is already 4 seconds dead. And that's with only 350 horsepower. And the great thing is, you can put a 6.2 litre V8 into this, or even a V12. And with that kind of power, well, it can worry the CLK GTR and a variety of others pretty easily, because even though it doesn't have a huge amount of power, it doesn't have a huge amount of weight either. In stock form, it weighs 1100 kilos, and consequently the horsepower per tonne is still 318, which for a car that only has 350 horsepower to begin with, is very good. Now the torque is 295 pound-feet, it is a turbo-aspirated engine. You might expect it to be naturally aspirated with that kind of power, but interestingly not. And in terms of straight-line performance, as I said, it's not quite as quick as you might hope. Most road-going GT1 cars tend, with some exceptions, to be capable of about 200 miles per hour. Some can go a little bit higher, but most tend to be between 195 and 205. There are a few exceptions to that, on either end, higher or lower, so this one is quite a bit slower than most of the others. However, as soon as you tune this thing, it goes to a whole nother level, because even in stock form, without even upgrading the tyres, it already takes corners like an actual race car. And I would say, in fact I'd say without any shadow of a doubt, that this is a better handling car than the 911 GT1 and the CLK GTR. Now they are great cars, and if you put those cars, even again in stock form, against most other supercars in the game, there are very few supercars which can keep up with road-going GT1 cars around a technical circuit. Such as the Nordschleife, for instance, because they literally are race cars for the road. But the thing that differentiates the Elise is that even though it has so much less power than its racing counterpart, it feels like a race car still. Now the others do as well, but in a more abstract way. They are almost more sensible, if you want to think of it that way. They're quieter, a little bit smoother, they have some amenities in the interior, stuff like comfier seats and more soundproofing. This doesn't feel like it has any of that. Because of the fact that it's a Lotus and they always have bare bones track cars anyway, it really does feel like a race car that happens to have a license plate. That is exactly what this car should be like, because that's what people want from a Lotus. Essentially an upmarket version of a go-kart. And that is precisely what this car is. Now, the price is pretty high, 850 grand, but at the same time, of course, when you get the VIP pack, or if you just get the DLC, you get the car for free anyway, so it doesn't really matter that much, it's incidental. Plus 850 grand, I think is a pretty good price. This car certainly deserves to cost that much. It's important, it's rare. As far as I can recall, I think they only made one road-going version, so it's actually one of the rarest GT1 cars of all. So overall, I would say, if you're wondering whether or not to buy the DLC pack, this car alone is worth the whole pack. Or, if you can get the car on its own, which I'm not sure if you can or not, then at least get this one. Because even if you're not a super fan of it, it's an extremely useful car. It's in the S category, and it is truly a track monster, and a surprisingly forgiving one. So overall, I am super stoked to see this car finally back in the game. It looks the part, it sounds the part, and it performs far better than I expected it to. So, pretty awesome, as far as I'm concerned at least, and of course, stick around on the channel for more reviews and tunes. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.